And before we get started with tonight's program, we wanted to tell you a little bit what your interest for our program coming up in February. And Kate has been working hard on that, so I'm going to let her talk about it a little.
Hey, it's great to see everybody. Thank you for coming out. It's really nice to be in person again. And hello to the Zoomers, everybody at home. Okay, so for February, if you guys want to mark your calendars, it's an easy day to remember. It's Valentine's Day. We're going to get together on Tuesday, February 14th from 6:30 to 8 at the Bookseller. And this is an extravaganza of wine and books. And so we're going to be bringing in the author Joseph Peterson to talk about the exploration of love in his book Memorandum from the Iowa Cloud Appreciation Society. So it promises to be a good evening. So keep that in mind for February. Thank you.
So to learn more about this upcoming event and others, I encourage you to get the Midland Authors News. You can sign up if you're not already a member or not already on our email list. There's a list outside of this room, and we encourage you to leave your name and your email, and we will put you on the list, so you will be in the know. Okay, so now, today we are here to unspool some of the mysteries of mystery writing. And I could not be happier and more excited to introduce our illustrious panel of renowned mystery authors, Tracy Clark, Michelle Cox, Mia Manansala, and Lori Rader-Day. Tracy Clark is the author of the Cass Range Chicago Mystery Series, featuring ex-cop turned PI, Cassandra Raines. A multi-nominated Anthony, Lefty, Edgar, McCavity, and Seamus Award finalist, Tracy is also the 2020 and 2022 winner of the G.P. Putnam Son Sue Grafton Memorial Award and the 2022 Sarah Paretsky Award. Hot off the press is Hyde, her new police procedural featuring Detective Harriet Foster of the Chicago Police Department, who is on the hunt for a serial killer with a deadly affinity for redheads. So if anybody's a redhead out there, beware. The second entry in that series, Fall, is going to release in 2024, so look for that as well. Michelle Cox is the author of the Henrietta and Inspector Howard series. Her latest, Spying Eye, is the 6th book in the series and takes us to France in what Kirkus describes as an engaging and effective romp rich with historical details. And I love history, so I'm really excited to read that one. Michelle also writes Novel Notes of Local Lore, a weekly blog dedicated to Chicago's forgotten residents. Her books have won over 60 international awards. Michelle is hard at work on her latest novel. Mia P. Manansala is the author of the multi-award-winning Tita Rosie's Kitchen Mystery Series and uses humor and murder to explore aspects of the Filipino diaspora, queerness, and her millennial love for pop culture. Blackmail and Bibinka is Mia's most recent entry in the series, where our heroine grapples with the return of a long-lost cousin who just might also be a murderer. Lori Rader-Day is the Edgar Award-nominated and Agatha, Anthony, and Mary Higgins Clark Award-winning author of Death at Greenway, also The Lucky One, Under a Dark Sky, and others. Death at Greenway is her latest and is set during World War II at the holiday home of Agatha Christie, where 2 young nurses have to unravel the truth when a mysterious murder victim washes up on the shore. Lori co-chairs the Midwest Mystery Conference and teaches creative writing at Northwestern University. So please join me in welcoming our panelists.
We arm wrestled and I won, so I get to ask the questions. So my first question, I love an origin story. I love hearing about how people become writers. How many people are in the audience are writers? Awesome. So I'm going to start with Tracy because you're putting up a fuss about going first. So you've identified yourself as somebody who likes to go first. How did you know you were a writer for the first time?
I think I knew I was a writer for the first time when I figured out that somebody actually wrote books, that they weren't these magical things that sort of popped out of the vegetable patch somewhere, that somebody actually sat down and this came out of their heads. And I figured if that was a thing, that was the thing that I wanted to do. I always loved stories. I loved reading. When my mother stopped reading for me, I started reading for myself. And soon after that, the desire to sort of write something like this, myself, for me, with myself on the pages, became a thing. And it became a burning thing that never went away. It's not something I got over. It just got more intense. So I sort of started writing really seriously, not until like college. But I was writing all along in a little notebook under my mattress that only I saw. Little stories, didn't make much sense, but I still was in the habit of sort of doing it, writing stories, reading, writing stories, reading, writing stories. And then I got serious about it, and several decades of frustration and stress sort of followed after that. But yeah, that's how I got started. Stories didn't pop up, somebody wrote them, I wanted to write one myself.
My story is actually pretty similar. Do you remember the book that made you realize?
It was Dr. Seuss, Green Eggs and Ham.
Okay, okay.
I still have my copy, not the original. That sort of disintegrated somewhere around grade 2 or 3. But I have a copy still in my bookshelf. That's my book. I love it. I still read it. So that one was the first one. And then all of the other books that came after that, Nancy Drew, Agatha Christie. I mean, just sort of like a snowball down a hill. So yeah, that was my entry drug.
Mine was, it was one of the Ramona Quimby books. I don't remember which book it was exactly, but I realized somebody
wrote that.
What is this Beverly Cleary person doing on the cover of this book? What is happening here? So same. Michelle, how did you know that you were a writer for the first time?
That's hard. I think when I was about 11, maybe 12, I got a set of Louisa May Alcott books for Christmas, and I read them over and over and over and over again. And I wanted to be part of the story somehow. I wanted to put myself in the story, and the only way to do that was to write it. And so I would try to write what now would probably be called fan fiction of Louisa May Alcott. So, but that didn't go well, so I gave up. And then I just did illustrations of them. I still had this burning desire to somehow be part of the story. And as time went on, I got to high school. I was trying to decide whether I wanted to really be a writer, to really go for it, or to be a doctor. That was my other love. And I decided that being a doctor sounded less scary. So I pursued that for a couple of years in college, and then I just happened to be taking a Victorian Lit class, and I just said to myself, you know what, you have to stop running from what you really love. And so I switched my major, but still didn't start writing until many, many, many years later when I had an opportunity, some time opened up, and I said, you know what, it's time to write the novel that you always wanted to write.
My first attempt was also fan fiction. It was Ramona Quimby. I thought, if this Beverly person could do it, you know, I'll give it a shot. I didn't get very far, though.
Right.
And then what you said about, you know, medicine or creative writing. Have you seen the book dedication that was like, Mom, you know, I would have made a terrible doctor. People would have died. It's my favorite book dedication ever.
No.
Mia, how about you? How did you become a writer for the first time?
For the first time, similar to Michelle, I was definitely in grade school. I want to say maybe like 5th grade. Around that time, the teachers were assigning like creative writing assignments, and I remember getting, you know, in grade school, like at the end of the year, all the students would get like an award that was special for them, you know, not just like, oh, best attendance, but like really like specifically for them. And my 5th grade teacher gave me a certificate for all the wonderful stories that I wrote. And that was when I was just like, oh, like it wasn't just me doing the school assignment. Someone thought I was good at it. You know, I had always loved reading. You know, for you it was Ramona Queen, for me it was Encyclopedia Brown. was like my big love when I was younger, followed by Boxcar Children and Babysitter's Club, because I'm a child of the 90s. And, you know, I remember there was like this one specific story that sticks out in my head, and I'm just like, oh man, my path started so much earlier than I thought. And we were supposed to rewrite the Three Little Pigs, like do a reimagining of the Three Little Pigs story. In my version, the big bad wolf was a drug dealer, and the three little pigs were trying to take him down because he was messing up their neighborhood. Now, I was like 10, but I'm just like, oh, okay, so I guess mystery, crime fiction was.
Well, that brings me to my next question. I think sometimes people who are not mystery writers always wonder, well, how did you choose mystery writing? And I think, how many people in the audience are mystery writers? There's a couple-ish. Kate Hannigan, why is your hand not up? All right, okay. Everybody's just mystery curious. So how did you choose, or maybe you didn't choose, to become a mystery writer? And I think I'm going to go to Mia first, because that's a nice segue.
Yeah. It's also connected to her, that's why.
That's right.
So actually, I didn't think I was going to be a mystery writer. I thought I was going to write middle grade fantasy, because that was what kind of captured my imagination when I was younger. It's what I really, really loved. But, you know, I had dabbled in it over the years. I gave up creative writing in college. I was an English major, but that's academic writing, not creative writing. And it wasn't until many years later. So after I graduated, I taught English in South Korea for about 3.5 years. And when I came back, I was, I guess, I don't know, a quarter life crisis. Like, I was like, I'm almost 30. I'm living at home again. I had traveled the world and gone all these adventures, and now I have a curfew, and I'm working this part-time job, and like, is this all there is? And then I remembered how much I loved writing. And I was like, why don't I try to find that passion again? Why don't I try to like reconnect with that side? And I literally Googled Chicago writing class. And I found several of them. I don't know if y'all know this, but writing classes are expensive. But I found Story Studio Chicago, and they had a 1-day mystery writing workshop that was in my budget. And I was like, well, I love reading mysteries. Like, I grew up in a multi-generational household, so I grew up watching like Murder, She Wrote and Matlock and Perry Mason with my grandparents, and my mom introduced me to Nancy Drew and Mary Higgins Clark. So like, mystery has always been a part of my reading life and my media life, but I'd never thought of writing it because it's hard. Mysteries always seemed so hard. But I'm like, you know, the price is right. I really want to try this. I love mysteries. Why don't I give it a shot? And that class was taught by Lori Rader-Day. And the idea I came up with in that class, she looked at what I had written, and she was like, oh, is this your first class? 'Cause, you know, you know, kind of give your introduction to tell you like what your writing background is like. And I was like, yeah, this is my very first creative writing class. And she's like, I think you're a mystery writer. I think you've got something here. And at the time, she was the president of the Mystery Writers of America Midwest. And she put on the big, like, oh, by the way, you know, I'm the president of this organization, and, you know, our meetings are free. You know, you have to pay to join, but the meetings are free. I think you should meet other writers and figure out, you know, more about this. And that was back in 2015, and I haven't looked back.
And which book are you on now right now?
I'm currently revising book 4.
Star Maker, that's me. Tracy, how did you know you were a mystery writer? When did you know?
Kind of like Mia, I used to watch those old shows with my mother and grandmother, Banachek, Mannix, Barnaby Jones. You know, so I sort of got into that rhythm of private investigators, which was sort of my sweet spot. So I started there, and then I sort of tried to find books that sort of were in that area. So I would read Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys and stuff like that, and then that sort of got me into Agatha Christie. Agatha Christie got me into the 80s when Sarah Paretsky and Sue Grafton and all those great writers started going. You know, so it was a natural progression. Started out really on television and black and white old movies, 30s and 40s, and then books to find sort of feed that sort of desire. And then that sort of snowballed again. The 80s, 90s, that's when there's a great wave of African-American writers came in, Valerie Wilson Wesley, Eleanor Taylor Bland. I read them all. I was still trying to sort of write and sort of teach myself how to write, but I knew what area I wanted to be in. I know this was my niche. PI fiction was my sort of baby, and I just had to sort of teach myself how to do it. And that took several years, read a lot of books, took a lot of classes, but at a certain point you sort of have to stop the classes and just sort of jump off and do it yourself and sort of get in there in the dirt and sort of wallow around and throw paper away and revise and revise and revise and get better. So that was my route. It started at Mannix and got all the way through to the end where I am now, and I'm on book 6 and having a great time.
Mannix.
Mannix.
It is a long time since I heard the word Mannix. How about you guys?
Rockford Files.
Rockford
That's
Files.
news for me.
Rockford Files.
Before
There we
my
go.
time.
What my dad watched on TV, right?
Basically.
How about you, Michelle? How did you become a mystery writer?
Well, as Tracy and Mia were saying, I was a huge mystery fan as a kid. So I was a big Trixie Belden fan, and my best friend was a Nancy Drew. And so we always had this discussion about who was the better detective. But I sort of, as I got older, I sort of grew away from mystery. And, you know, as I said, I was a lit major, so I read a lot of the classics. And my true love is actually historical fiction, which is probably why I write historical mystery. So the first book I wrote was just straight up historical fiction. It did not get published, and so after trying for a couple of years, I thought, okay, it's time to start over. And I thought, you know, what would be the most attractive to an agent? So I thought that was mystery. Turns out not so much necessarily, but I found my path forward, and I think that's why my books do have a mystery in each of them, but they are also very steeped in historical detail, and there's also a romance thread running through. So
Are they shelved on mystery, or are they shelved in historical?
no, they're shelved in mystery.
Mystery, okay.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out which way I want to go from here. So one of the things that I think then when mystery writers get together, one of the things we talk about is the mystery community. And then but I also find that people who don't write mystery don't understand what I mean by that. You guys all know what I mean when I say mystery community. They might not. So before we go too much further, Mia, how would you describe the mystery community to the Muggles?
Like the nicest people with the most devious minds. We were talking earlier about a fellow Midwest mystery writer, Jess Lowry. And was it Michelle? You were saying like how dark, or someone was talking about how dark it was. If you've ever met Jess, she is like the funniest, nicest, just chill Minnesotan. And then you read her stuff and you're like, oh. But, and it's just a lot of like sitting around laughing and joking about like ways to kill people and how to hide bodies and things like. We were at was it O'Hare one time? And
Yes, O'Hare, tell the story.
a bunch of us were flying out to this mystery conference. I believe it was BoucherCon, which is the biggest mystery con, and like a bunch of us just happened to be on the same flight there. And so there was like, you were there too, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
There was at least like 4 or 5 of us, and we were just sitting there talking, and as you do, you start talking shop. And I don't know how we started talking about like dead bodies, and then suddenly we just realized it was like kind of like quiet around us, and like where we were sitting by the gate, and then Lori turns around and she was like, "We're all mystery writers, by the way," you know, because it's just I'm like, oh yeah, if you're just like a regular person waiting for your flight at the gate, and you hear all these people talking about like, oh man, yeah, I tried to hide a body there, it didn't work out, so I had to like completely redo it. It's like really weird, but it's. Yeah,
There was a Paul in gate 43B or whatever it was. There were people staring and like, okay, you should all know, general announcement, we're all mystery writers, we're going to a conference. And to the rest of you, I was like, Gen Pop, guys, Gen Pop. Be chill. Tracy, you're very highly involved in the mystery community. Do you want to chime in with why? Why are you highly involved in the mystery community? What do you get out of it?
I'm involved because it's the community. I started writing, and there was absolutely nothing around me, nothing. And I went to mystery conferences. I went every year by myself. I'm an introvert, so you know how big a thing that is. I had to drive all the way to the west suburbs. I got lost. I missed the cocktail breakfast. You know, I missed the kind of, all of it.
There's always a cocktail breakfast, by the way.
I did it for years. I just sort of committed myself to doing it. I needed to do this, and I found Eleanor Taylor Bland there. She read my manuscript, or the part I had. She said, "That's very good. I'm going to do something. I want you to send me the rest of it. When you finish it, send the rest of it to me." And I did, and that sort of started a years-long relationship, a friendship of back and forth, her helping me out, I'm asking for advice, her giving it freely. And I sort of made the commitment then, before I had even joined anything, Sisters in Crime, Mystery Writers of America, all the groups that are out there, that she didn't have to do that for me. And that I made the commitment then that I was going to do that for the next person. And just something that I did. And so when I got published, my first thing, the first time I got that email that says, "We want your book, we're going to give you this for it," I joined Sisters in Crime, Mystery Writers of America, all of it all at the same time. That was my carrot. That was what I was working towards. I knew that the groups were there, that I could have joined at any time, but I needed that to sort of, that was going to be my thing. When I got to that point where I got my publishing contract, that was going to be my reward. So I did it. And I've been sort of giving back ever since. I'm on boards.
You're on a lot of boards.
I'm on a lot of boards. I volunteer all the time. I never turn a writer away. If somebody comes for me for advice or to look at something, I'm there. And I just sort of pay it forward. And in addition to that, or an exception to that, what I get out of that is the community. So I give support, they give it. I need advice, somebody's there to give it. So you sort of, you know, rely on each other. It's like a family at this point. Everybody's nice, everybody's good, a little quirky and a little creepy sometimes in terms of what they're outputting, but nice people all around. So you have to have that family sort of backing you up, because this is sort of a tough business. There's rejection everywhere. Somebody doesn't like your book and you have to go back and start all over again. There's somebody there who's been through that experience and can sort of walk and talk you through it. So it's good to have that sort of support, that advocacy, that family, and I rely on it absolutely 100%, and I know everybody on this panel does too, so it's good to have.
Writing can be so lonely, you know, and especially when you're starting out and you don't know what you don't know. So when I mentioned, you know, Laura was my first class, she mentioned, someone asked about a query letter. I'm like, what the heck is a query letter? You know, I didn't even know that much, you know, and so yeah, this far, you're like, oh, it's just so basic, but you have to start somewhere. And it's lonely, yes, but very few of us make it alone. I definitely didn't. I would have given up a million times. I don't even know if I would have joined the community if Lori hadn't been there to extend her hand and welcome me in and send me emails, be like, hey, this sounds like a good opportunity for you. I have a wonderful mentor named Kelly Garrett who also welcomed me into other communities. Giving back means so much. It really does.
I sent you a lot of emails about scholarships and stuff. I remember that. Like,
Yeah.
apply again.
Yeah, basically.
So everybody on this panel, except for me, writes a series. I write standalones. That's just what we call it in mystery. I don't know what they call it elsewhere, but I want to talk a little bit about that. Michelle, what drives you to write a series? Why do you want to write series books?
Well, it didn't start out that way. The first book, A Girl Like You, was just supposed to be a one-off and to try to get my foot in the door. And halfway through, I just started to really fall in love with the characters, and I didn't want the book to end. I didn't want, you know, this world that I had created to end. So I thought, okay, I'll turn it into a series. And there's a lot of benefits to that because, as I've just said, you've already built the world. You've already built these characters. And so each time you come up with a different plot, a different mystery. But for me, that's extremely satisfying, and I love going back each time to start a new book because I have my standard characters, but then I'm always bringing in guest actors, as I call them. and they sort of mingle with the old cast, and I feel like I'm almost like a director of like a mini-series, and I really enjoy that aspect. I have written 2 standalones as well, and those are enjoyable too. It's just you go into it with a different mindset. You go into it with a beginning, middle, end, and it's encapsulated. And there's really there's no cliffhanger, there's nowhere left for these characters to go. You've resolved everything. With a series, I always leave a little bit hanging at the end of every book, and I really enjoy that.
Did you design your series that way? When you started the first series book?
No,
No.
I didn't. And if I knew it was going to be a series, I would have set it up a little bit differently. So when I started writing book 2, I had to sort of change a little bit about the world, because I didn't want to write about a cop and his wife in the 30s in Chicago. I felt like that had already been done before. I really wanted it to be more about sort of talk a little bit more about class and the haves and the have-nots, and so I had to kind of create this upper society, and then, of course, I had all of the gritty Chicago characters as well, and I had to kind of figure out how I was going to transition into that sort of new world. So I think I did it.
Tracy, were you always going to write a series with your PI characters?
Well, I used to like reading series because I sort of liked sticking with the characters, but I sort of started my series sort of inadvertently because the first one got rejected so many times that I just sort of kept writing. I kept writing. I knew these characters. I'd written the first book, so I just kept writing about these characters. So by the time the first one sold, I had 2 other ones in that same vein. So there was my series, but it didn't start out that way.
They tell you not to do that, right?
Yeah, but
Yeah, but it worked for you,
it
so that's
worked
okay.
for me, so I just kept doing it. I knew these characters, I knew the setting, the world that I sort of created, and so I just sort of kept trying to perfect that. And so by the time the first one sold, I had 2 other ones, they took all 3, great, now we're off and running, and it became a series, so.
But you have a new series,
Yes, I do.
just came out last week, Tuesday.
Last week, yeah.
Yeah. But it sounds like there's already a
Funny
number
thing,
2.
That was supposed to be my standalone.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
My first opportunity for a standalone, this first book was going to be, and I handed it in, great, wonderful, it was okay, and they sort of said, well, the second book, we want those characters too. I said, crap. I said, so now I have 2 series going. I guess that's my thing.
We don't mind.
I mean,
We don't mind.
I don't mind either. I mean, it's just that, I sort of wanted to sort of get in your territory.
Is that hard to keep it separated?
It was to begin with because I still had the old voices in my head. I still had Cass and her crew and her setting and her world. And it took me quite a while for the first book in the second series to sort of get out of that, to sort of have Cass not be there. I would write the first couple of chapters and Cass would be there. This is not your book, go somewhere else. And it took forever to find Harriet. And I think I sort of eventually sort of slowly found her. But it took a while. It took some doing. It took a lot of thinking and a lot of sort of stepping back and trying to figure out who she was as opposed to who Cass was. So that was sort of a strange pivot for me. It took some time, but I think I sort of got it, sort of.
It sounds like there might be more Cass Rains.
There might.
There might?
Could be in the future. I have got one more to go for them, for Harriet, and we'll see what happens after that.
Okay, all right. And the new book is called Hide.
It's called Hide.
Just
yes.
came out. Okay. And then Michelle, what your most recent book is?
A Spying Eye.
A Spying Eye. All right. Now, Mia, you also write a series. We were talking just a little bit before about how quickly your series is going. Can you talk a little bit about how just the process and the timing of how your series is going?
Yeah, so I write in a subgenre of mystery called cozy mystery, and for people who are not familiar with that particular subgenre, I like to jokingly but also kind of seriously refer to them as like Hallmark movies with dead bodies. In that they're light, they're humorous, there's always going to be a happy ending, there is no graphic violence, sex, or bad language on the page. I literally wrote a book that my mom could read because my mom is the one who introduced me to cozy mysteries. She actually works at this library. She's a page.
Oh, she does? Oh.
Yeah, she's a page, so which means she's the person who shelves the books. And one day she was shelving books, and she happened to see a book called Chocolate Chip Cookie Murder, and she was like, huh, what's that about? Anyone who knows my family knows the two things we love are food and books. And so cozies, at least culinary cozies, because there's a subgenre within a subgenre, combine those two loves. And so cozies are almost always series, which is why I write them. I knew that going in. And they are released fairly quickly because cozy mystery readers as well as romance readers tend to be very voracious. And so my books have come out 8 to 9 months apart. So my first book came out last year. I'm a relatively new author. I debuted last May. My third book came out this past October, and my fourth book comes out so there's actually one full year between book 3 and book 4, which is like so long, apparently, to some readers. Whereas like, I also have a lot of like sci-fi fantasy writer friends who are just like, I would die on that schedule. And I'm like, I am very close, but you know what? That's what the publishing process is like.
So one of the questions I have is about the pros and cons of series and standalones. Why is it better to write a series? Why is it better to write a standalone? Do you have, anybody want to jump in on that? Michelle?
Well, it's definitely easier to market.
Okay.
When you have a series, because if people like your first book, then they will usually pick up the second book. So it's kind of an easy sell. So that's one of the advantages, I think, to, and you also have not a built-in audience, but you're building up a following, you're building up fans who are looking for your next book. And that's not always the case with a standalone writer. So I think that that's the big advantage.
I think what I've heard is for series books that you are always marketing the first book, though,
Yeah,
right?
it's your
Can you
loss
explain
leader.
that?
Yeah, so usually the first book of either a romance or a mystery series is you either give it away for 99 cents or for free. It's just permanently free. It's called the loss leader, and so usually there's a link in the back of your first book, which is very easy for a reader to click on, and it takes you right to whatever platform you buy your books on, and then they can easily buy the next book. So it's kind of a marketing strategy.
I don't think free is always the case. I mean, obviously, your first book is not going to be free. Mia, your publisher would probably put do you do book bubs and things like that? You get
I mean,
maybe
that's
the
more
first
like if
book.
you're like self-published or hybrid. Yeah, so like if you are traditionally published, so I'm with Berkeley, which is part of Penguin Random House, I have zero say in the cost. So like, don't get mad at me that ebooks are expensive. I can't help you with that. But it is really popular. Like if they are going to discount one of the books, particularly the ebooks, it would almost always be the first one.
Okay. That first one, get them in. Yeah, just like a drug. So Tracy, you said you were trying to write a standalone. What do you think the pros of writing standalones is? Tell me the pros of writing standalones, which you don't write, but I do. Go ahead, Tracy, go.
What are the pros? I don't know.
Why did you think that you were writing a standalone? Why did you decide that you were writing a
Because I was breaking
standalone?
away from these series characters, and I'd done that, and I was sort of trying to branch out a little bit, right?
Okay.
You always want to write something that you haven't written before. Sort of test yourself to see what else you can do. So I was going to write this standalone novel about this serial killer, real creepy, which is different from the PI series that I was doing, and I was sort of stretching myself. And so I handed it in proudly. Here's my standalone. Haha.
All done.
All done. I've done it. Now I can get in the Rader-Day territory, and it's going to be all great. And in the second book, they said, well, do you have any ideas for the second book? Well, I said, of course I do. I think I'm going to write about this. Well, actually, what do you think about maybe writing about the same crap? So it's a good problem to have. Don't get me wrong. It's a good problem to have. It's just that you sort of want to get to a point where you can sort of stretch a little bit and see what else you can do. What other kinds of stories can you tell? Whether or not you're a one-trick pony, or you can sort of have the gravitas to sort of expand a little bit and see what else is out there. So eventually, I hope to get to that point. Maybe not this book and the next one, but maybe the next one after that. Fingers crossed.
I write standalones because when I was writing my first 2 books, I think, I was working a full-time job, a pretty harsh one, and I needed to work during my lunch hour. That was the 1 hour a day that I could work. And so I needed something that was interesting enough to me to get me to the page every day at work. Say no to lunch with friends, real people, to go hang out with fake friends, fake people. It had to be interesting. And so when I finished the draft of my first book, it wasn't, I'm going to spend more time with these. I wanted something exciting. So I actually just started a new story instead of book 2. And that's how I became a standalone writer. I don't have a series. It's a shame. I hang my head in shame in the mystery community not having a series.
Series can be exciting. I mean, there's a different body every time. It's the same cast of characters, but the crime is different. The mode of murder is different. The situation is totally, new.
Didn't occur to me at the time.
Would you do it now?
I might, yeah.
Yeah.
Ann Cleves asked me to write a series.
Ooh.
I know. Ann Cleves writes,
Vera?
she lives in northern England and writes the Shetland and the Vera books that are, all her books are made into TV for some, she has 3 series that have been made into TV series. So when Ann Cleves says you should write a series, you have to think about it a little bit.
I mean, you said you were never going to write a historical, and then,
So-
and then you had
I already
Green.
broke that, yeah.
So,
Okay, speaking of historical, so Michelle, you and I have something. Hello? Did you guys hear that?
yeah.
All right.
Ghost.
Hey, tech people. All right. Michelle, you and I have something in common here that the others don't. We've both written historical novels. I did it once, nearly lost my mind. Michelle does it it sounds like as all your books. So tell me a little bit about, you've said a little bit why you're drawn to historical mysteries, but can you talk a little bit about the challenges of writing historical?
I think that the biggest challenge to writing historical is the women characters, because you want to make them authentic to the period, and yet you want them to be relatable to a modern reader. So that's a little bit tricky, because you want to have them, they need to have some independence and some sort of ability to kind of make their own choices. And so you have to be very, very careful about how you write that into the story and how you make it authentic. And I think it's also difficult to get the dialogue right. So there's nothing more that will take a reader out of a novel, a historical novel, is by a little, even just a tag of modern dialogue. So it's immediately takes the reader out of the story and sort of ruins it. So I'm very, very meticulous about my dialogue. I go through it over and over and over again and try to just make sure that it's very authentic to the period, which is hard to do.
Do you have like a favorite research method or story to share about historical research or anything you've done?
I do a lot on Google, to be honest. I did, with the last book, the latest book that just came out in October, A Spying Eye, I wanted to take the characters back to England or Europe, and I needed some sort of mystery to occur there. I had already done The Murdered Man in the English Village in book 3, and so I didn't want to repeat that. So I thought, maybe stolen art. And so I just Googled 1930s stolen art Europe, and the Ghent altarpiece came up, and that was I'm not the type of writer that just goes down rabbit holes all the time with research. I'm actually more into writing the story, which I know I'm a very big weirdo with that. But if there's sections that need research, I just fill in with X's and come back to that later, because I feel like then I just find the information that I need instead of studying something for 3 weeks and then just taking a line out of that. So the Ghent altarpiece was a little bit different. It's fascinating. A panel of it really was stolen in the 1930s, and that was a perfect setup because nobody knows what happened to it, even to this day. It's still an open case.
So you can tell them.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So I can say this might have come through my heroine and hero's possession at one point. And so it gave me a lot of freedom and imagination to think about what had happened. So that, you know, I could go on and on. There's so many fascinating, there's books written about this piece, and it's bizarre, strange history. So that was a lot of fun.
I'm the person, so I wrote one historical novel. I write mostly contemporary. And I was the person who did, I was so uncomfortable with the story that, and knowing that what I wanted to do was get it right. And so I had to do so much research just to begin, just to even dip my toe in. So I'm definitely the person who's like, I'm going to study this for 3 weeks at least. And then, you know, I get this one little piece out of it. But I have done research for contemporaries as well. Do you, Tracy, I know you do a little bit of on-the-ground research. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I write about cops and PIs and stuff, so when I sort of run into a problem, which is often, I just call a cop somewhere and ask them what would happen in this situation. For Hyde, that was my first police procedural. And I sort of wanted to get it right, and not completely right, I mean, it's fiction, but I needed to know who touched the body first. I mean, so I've got the body there. Does my homicide detective touch the body first, or does the tech people touch the body? So I needed to know all that information. So I called my brother-in-law, who's a homicide detective, and I said, hey.
Handy.
Yeah, I know, right? So I said, who touches the body first? Would she touch the body first, or would somebody? And I said, well, you know, so he goes through the entire process of who does what, when, what happens after the body is sort of looked at and whatever, who takes it away. So I needed to know that information so that I can write about it with some kind of you know, knowledge or something, or like I know what I'm talking about. So yeah, I sort of write until I get stuck, and then I call somebody, and they unstick me, and then I write some more. That's how I do it. I don't like to do a lot of research. It's kind of like math, and writers don't like math. So I just sort of write until I get stuck, write myself into a corner, I call somebody, they get me out, and then I keep going.
I was thinking also that you do a little bit of footwork sometimes for locations.
Okay, I have a favorite drain pipe because I've talked about it several times, but I'm going to take a picture of it. But yeah, I have a drain pipe. I won't tell you where it is, but it's just the right size for a body to be stuffed in. And eventually, I will write a book with that drain pipe in it. But that's my spot. I'm saving it for that right.
What are you saving it for, Tracy?
For the right story. I haven't got the right story yet.
Okay.
When I get that right story, that drain pipe is going to show up, and it's going to be perfect.
It's going to be magnificent.
It's going to be great.
You're gonna get like so many text messages. Like once it finally comes out, like, we're gonna be reading, I'm like, oh, it's there.
Finally! That drain pipe, finally.
Yes. So yeah, I go around. Actually, when I did Hyde, I actually walked through the Riverwalk because I needed to know what it looked like. The last time I was there, I was working at the Tribune Tower. It's different now. So I walked it all the way down to Lower Wacker. I just wanted to see what was there still. And that's where I set most of the dead bodies. So that's research. That's me walking the line there, just to check it out, to make sure that I sort of get it right. So, you know, I do a little bit of it, not a lot. I don't like to do a lot because, you know, I think the story is more important than the actual, you know, ABC. But, you know, when I need it, I do it.
And Mia, you do a little bit of research that I'm a little jealous of. You do recipe research. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, because, so again, I write culinary, so my series is centered around a family-owned Filipino restaurant in a fictional town just outside of Chicago. And again, it's pretty typical in cozy mysteries to have recipes at the end. So anytime I get tired of writing, I'm like, oh, I'm not procrastinating, I'm researching. And you know, I'm like, of course, like, yeah, this dozen cookies, that's research. I get to write this off on my taxes.
I have to eat this.
That big old cake I just decided to make because, like, I don't know, revisions are hard. Research.
Research.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like it. I like that kind of research. My best research moment was for Death at Greenway. I'm not imagining that, right?
No.
Somebody is having a little trick with. Is this place haunted? It might be.
Probably.
150 years.
Death at Greenway is set at Agatha Christie's house during World War II, where children who were evacuated out of London were actually sent there. It's based on a true story. But the best research moment is that I got to stay at Agatha Christie's house. as the guest of the National Trust who owns it now. So my husband and I stayed there 3 nights, 4 days, and we just lived there like Agatha and Max, her second husband. But we didn't have access to a kitchen. That was the bad part. So we had to carry in like fruit, bread, cheese. And I had no access to tea, which my friends, you will understand that was a dire situation. So every morning we were the first people in the line at the cafe when it opened to get my tea. So I have some speed round questions for you all, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So if you have a question for anybody on the panel or anybody from Society of Midland Authors, we'd be happy to take questions. So speed round. Music or silence while you write? Michelle?
Silence.
Mia?
Instrumental music.
Okay. Tracy?
Silence with headphones.
Is like soundproofing headphones? Yeah.
Double
All right.
silence. Okay,
Yeah.
All right.
that's good.
Let's see. You all said silence. I can't ask you that one.
I said instrumental music.
Well, best band to listen to while writing? Lord Huron. That's my answer. I listen to music, so.
I'm a huge nerd, so it's like video game soundtracks and anime soundtracks and like, classical pop covers. I'm like, ooh, this cover of WAP is excellent.
Like Hall & Oates, but like
yeah.
with
Meg Thee
violins?
Stallion, but with violins.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
I have a friend, Marianne Mahanraj, a local writer, writes to, well, at least she did at one point, write to this music that's like Lord of the Rings soundtrack. It's very epic.
Yeah.
I mean, depends on what you're writing, I guess. Okay, I said speed round, sorry. Plot ahead or plow ahead? Pantsing.
Plot.
Plot?
Plot.
Plot.
Panther.
Pantser. Okay, pantser is the term we use. I don't know if it's used outside of mystery, but if you plot, you're a plotter. If you don't plot, if you just get going, pantser. And I'm a pantser as well, Tracy. All right. Word count goal or time goal?
Time.
Word count.
Story.
All right. Whatever, Tracy.
Right, all right. Cheater.
Cheater. Notebook or computer?
Computer.
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 Okay, computer.
I can't read my own writing.
Although I will use a notebook if I'm stuck, if I'm trying to get unstuck from something. Okay. Best writing snack?
I don't have a snack. Coffee. I drink 100 cups of coffee.
All right.
Oh, this is a speed round. I could take all day.
You could do a couple of rounds.
There's a lot of delicious food in her.
I know Sarah Paretsky says it's M&Ms because if she gets a sentence or a word, it's very small amount of writing, and then she's like, and I get an M&M. And I'm like, that's a really good plan. You're just like, you're not going to answer?
Lately, cookies and tea.
Okay, nice.
Twizzlers.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about your Twizzlers. That is a real thing.
I know, right?
Best writing companion? You can say nobody.
None.
None.
My dogs.
Nobody.
Nobody. All right. Dog. Like I could do anything without my dog. Best writing inspiration?
That's a speed round?
Yeah. Well, you can take some time with it if you want. What inspires you to get writing?
Oh, I love creating. I love creating this world.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like in general, big picture, spite.
Okay, yeah. You could do a whole panel on how spite will influence you to get off your ass.
Deadline.
Deadline.
Oh,
all right.
good one.
I think, so the book that I wrote this year, I read a lot of writing advice. I went back and read Bird by Bird again, and I would just read a little bit, and then that feeling would come, like, I need to put this down and write, and so I would get started much easier. That was my inspiration. Best writing resource, anybody have one? Anybody? Anything?
I like the Emotional Thesaurus. Oh. Those series of books. Those are great.
Okay. I'm going to say Story Studio Chicago is a place that I actually took a class there. That's how I got started with writing, too. So I took a class there and then ended up teaching there, and that's where I met Mia. Anybody else? No, all right. And then what do you do when you're stuck? I already gave you mine. I go to a notebook and noodle on that for a little while.
I take a walk.
I will maybe, instead of writing in the manuscript, I will either like open a Google Doc, so it's like completely blank, or I also have something called like an Alpha Smart, which is like a word processor, because I like revising. I hate drafting, right? The blank page is so scary to me. The Alpha Smart, the screen is literally this big, like you can't see your other words. You can only write forward, and it's so tedious to like go back, so I can't constantly edit myself, and I just have to keep writing, keep writing, keep writing. So it helps me not get stuck in my head. I wish I could be a notebook person. I have like 20 beautiful notebooks at home that I just can't use.
One of my resolutions for the year is to use the pretty notebooks, although I did start it last year. I started using the good notebooks. It's very satisfying. Use the good notebooks, people. All right, does anybody have any questions for anybody on the panel? Oh, yeah.
Question, please come up to the mic here so that our virtual viewers can hear everything. And I'll start with a question from our virtual viewers. So this is from Harold. This is for Tracy Clark. What are the odds of Detective Harriet Foster teaming up with a former police officer, now private investigator, Cass Rains?
Crossover.
Crossover, right. I don't know, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? Because I don't think they would get along.
Yeah.
Cass is sort of weird, and Harriet is almost non-communicative. I mean, she's just all in herself, so I don't see how it would be fun, now that we mention that.
Conflict.
Maybe a little short story crossover. Yeah, yeah. Write that
That'd be
down.
good. Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. So first, thank you for the discussion. I've learned a few things. I had a lot of fun. You are such nice ladies, and my question comes out of that. I could hardly imagine how can you write those horrible things. I thought maybe it's at 2 a.m. in the middle of the night with a gun and a knife on your desk. And can you tell us about your writing schedule? When do you write? During the day or the night or the morning?
We're such nice ladies who write about murder. Michelle, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I have to write every day in the morning. It has to be my first thing. So I'm allowed to look quickly at my email to make sure there's no disaster or that I didn't win the Pulitzer or something. So far, no. But then after that, I'm not allowed any social media. I just have to start writing. And because that's when my brain is its crispest and freshest, so I usually write for about an hour or two, and then I move on to other, like, marketing things.
Mia, how about you?
So last spring, like I quit my job to become a full-time writer. Before that, I had spent time as a teacher, so I would usually stay after work and find an empty classroom and just try to write that way, because I knew the minute I get home, first of all, like the Blue Line all the way out to Forest Park, I was like, no, thank you. I would be too tired to write by the time I got home. So I would stay at my job, find an empty classroom, write for hours, and then get on late at night. Now the problem is like, oh, I have all this time. How do I structure my day? And like Michelle, like I'm a late morning, early afternoon person. So like after 4 p.m., I'm kind of useless. So like I know to like if I haven't had that breakthrough by 4, it's like, okay, maybe it's not gonna happen. I put in the time, I put in the work. Maybe tomorrow will be a better thing. But yeah, late morning, early afternoon usually.
Tracy?
5:30 to 8, that's my time. If I'm not up at 5:30, my brain will wake me up. It knows that I
Oh,
should.
a.m.
Oh, you mean the night?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, a.m.
I was like, oh, she has a full-time job, 5:38, that makes
5:30
sense.
to 8
Okay.
a.m., that's my time. Then I swivel over to the day job, and then if I have an idea during the day, I have Post-it notes that I sort of stick on my laptop to sort of get me started at 5:30 a.m. the next morning.
Yeah.
Gross.
When I was working full-time, my lunch hour was the only hour. It was like, okay, I'm awake, I'm alert, I have an hour usually, not every day. I mean, you guys have jobs, you know how jobs can kind of leak into the time you're supposed to have. But I figured out that was the hour that I could usually claim, because when the weekend came, when you have all the time, something always comes up, or you push it off, you push it off, you push it off. So yeah, find the time that you have and make it work for you. Obviously, the answer is All the above. Thank you.
Hi, so my question's mostly for Mia, but the rest of you can touch on this. Mia, your series has so much diversity, so much queerness, frankly, that I didn't have growing up reading, and so I found a lot of comfort in that. Is that why you chose to put so much of that into your series? And why is it so important for us to have those diverse characters?
Yeah, I mean, Tracy was talking about it earlier, but like, reading what it is, writing what it is you want to read, right? Again, I grew up reading mysteries ever since I was a child. I can't name any Filipino characters in mystery. Even in general Filipino-American literature, in any genre, like how many can you name, right? And so I was reading these books that didn't reflect me or my life, that I loved so much but didn't seem to love me back, particularly in cozy mysteries. I read widely, but cozy mystery is kind of my jam. Because it's that really nice, sweet, like, it's like a Great British Baking Show episode. You're just like, this is so nice. And it's like, oh, but brown people and queer people don't seem to exist here. What is that trying to say? And so I just wrote the world around me. I was born and raised in Chicago. I grew up in Hermosa, which is a majority working class Latina neighborhood. My family are immigrant Filipinos. And so, it's not like, a diversity checkbox just checking off a list. It's me filling in the niche of like everything I've always wanted to see but have never had available to me.
Good question, thank you.
That's part of the spite thing, but that's a much, much longer story.
Maybe we'll do a little follow-up with the spite.
Well, thank you so much for an excellent panel, and your comments are so insightful for writers and readers of all genres. So it's been very, very good. My question is about the community you mentioned that you find so supportive and helpful. So do you rely on other readers and send them different versions of everything you write, or do you write yourself and it's a wrap?
Anybody want to take that first?
So I used to be part of various writing groups. I used to have like critique partners and beta readers. But as I mentioned earlier, my books come out 8 to 9 months apart, which means I have to write that draft in 6 months or less, and I am not a fast writer, which I know it sounds ridiculous, but for my genre, I am actually a very slow writer. So I am always down to the wire when it comes to getting my book into my editors. So, that's what the thing about your debut is you have all the time in the world to make it, you tinker with it, you have your friends read it, you get the feedback, you get to incorporate it. Once you're on a contract, on a deadline, I would love to have outside readers on it just because, everyone has their own internal biases, right? Is the book that's in my head coming out on the page? And it's really hard to get that, but I personally don't have that time anymore. I would love to. For my non-contracted stuff, yes. So like I have a short story that's coming out later this year that I had eyes on before. I have proposals for new series and new genres that I hope to write on that I get eyes on. But if it's on deadline, basically only my editor's feedback matters. I don't know about y'all.
I have a little group of beta readers that I send it out to. After I edit it myself several times, I send it out to my beta readers, and they give me a lot of feedback on story. And then I make whatever changes I want to make, and then I send it out to a real editor. But that first feedback is really valuable to me.
When you say real editor, do you mean you have a development editor or you have your editor? Do you
No, she does a little bit of developmental, but she's more a copy editor.
Okay.
Before it goes to
Okay.
my project manager, and then they edit it again.
This is where community sort of comes in, right? You have a group of writer friends, right, that you can sort of tag maybe occasionally. In fact, I sent my latest one to Lori because I was sort of worried about it. It was supposed to be my first standalone. We won't get into that. And she's the standalone master. So I wanted her to sort of see it and give me her opinion upon it. And she had
It's great.
She had the time, and she did me the solid, and I appreciate it. And I'm reading her next one now. So that's what you sort of do. You sort of rely on your writer friends to sort of help you out a little bit, and you do the same for them, and you have that resource. That's the resource that you have. That's your family. Those are your people. So you're lucky to have that. I use it at every opportunity that I can do to use it, and it's good. It's good.
I also use beta readers that are not writers. I have a couple of friends, or are writers of different things. They don't necessarily write mystery, but they're readers. People are readers, and they know how a story works, and they know when something's not quite right, or they sense something that's missing in the story. So someone who, one of my beta readers, writes poetry and nonfiction. Just a friend. Yeah. One thing that having the community is good for, in terms of having someone read your work, is blurbs.
Yeah.
The groan of pain was everyone in this room who's published. The blurb system is tiresome, but you have to go through it, and then you have to pay it back sometimes by reading, new books. And it's great to read new books, but it takes up time. So that's one of the reasons it's really great to join early, not the second you get your book contract, Tracy, but you can join at any time.
Anytime.
Because you can build that community that then helps you get to the point where you get the book contract, and then you've got people you can ask for blurbs or to do events with you, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I was part of the community for 6 years before my book came out. So, when blurb time, I was just like, hey, friends.
Hey, everyone I know.
It actually happened.
So you wrote a really quality first book. How did it jump to publication? Did you go through? Did you have agents? You're talking about a mentor system. What else?
Okay. I did the traditional, I'll start with me because I went total textbook, wrote the book, tried to get an agent, got an agent. That agent sold the book to my publisher. I mean, very standard process. But I did a lot of work ahead of time on my book to make sure that when it went out to agents, it was pretty easy to pick it up. Mia, you had a fairly standard process. You had a little bit of a saga, didn't you?
Yeah.
Tracy,
Mine's
you go
a little
next.
Hers is long, too.
Mine's long, too. Mine took over 20 years to get published. Writing, querying, which is sort of putting that letter out there, describing what your book is. They may or not want to see it, usually not. So that went on for many years, and it took over 20 years for me to actually get, it's like fishing. So you put the pole out there with a line on there, and you only need one editor, you only need one agent, but it takes almost sometimes forever to sort of find that one person who believes in your book as much as you believe in it. And it took me over 20 years to do that. So when they got the first one, I had the other ones because I just kept going. Lori tells me now that that's the wrong thing to do. Whatever.
It's not wrong. It's just the sort of thing that you would say not to do, but it worked out for you.
I'm sort of pig-headed. That's another thing writers need. They need to be sort of stubborn and really pig-headed. You have to believe in the work that you're doing and believe that it's good and believe that you have something to say. And so when those rejections come in, and they will come in, that you will have this sort of internal fire that keeps you going. So I had the query letters, and I would send them out with my little 50 pages, which is what they required, and it would come back with a standard rejection letter, and I would take that rejection letter, and I'd put it on a file, and I'd keep going. I'd do it again, another rejection letter came in. By the time I got published, I had maybe a file about that thick, but that's what I needed to do to sort of keep myself motivated, to keep myself moving forward, to keep myself sort of teaching myself how to write so that I can get to a point when my one person came, I would be ready. So it took several years. I still have that rejection file. I think I threw it away maybe a couple of years ago, and that's after 2 or 3 books that are out there. And I still know some of the editors who sort of rejected me. In fact, one of them was sort of sitting in the room, the conference room, when I got my Sue Grafton Award.
At the Edgars in New York City.
I came this close to saying, and in spite of, whoever, but I'm going to keep it classy. So yeah, you have to sort of have those motivation things to keep you going, because as Mia said, writing is a lonely thing. It's a lonely business. There's nobody standing in that room or sitting in that room with you and that laptop and that story that you have in your head, and you have to keep yourself going. So
writing is lonely. Publishing is heartbreaking, or it
Yeah.
can
It
be.
is.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, jump in there, Mia.
Yeah. Oh, first of all, just in case, if you don't know, a query letter is what you send out when you're looking for a literary agent. You want, like, if you want to go the traditional route, you get a literary agent to represent you. They sell your book to a publishing house. Don't want to assume, I didn't know what a query letter was, just in case we're just throwing around these terms you don't know. Mine's a little bit winding. So the book that I started in Lori's class was the first novel I ever finished. It won some like scholarships and grants. It got me into a mentorship program. I mentioned Kelly Garrett before. It got me my first agent, and then it never sold. It was on submission, which means my agent was sending it out for a year and a half. And for a year and a half, I got very close 3 times. So people don't really know how many yeses you need in publishing, right? It's not enough to write a good book. It's not enough to get an agent. It's not even enough to find an editor who likes you. A lot of times that editor has to talk to a sales team. And the sales, because publishing is a business. And the sales team decides whether or not you are a good risk. That's called acquisitions. Acquisitions are where your book go to die. I made it 3 times. 3 times. And 3 times the sales team said, she has a great voice and no audience. Nobody's gonna buy her book. I still remember a particular rejection that said in print, traditional mystery is for older white women. Nobody's gonna want her books. Spite. I knew she was wrong, so I kept writing. That book actually did get picked up by an editor. It was going to be published. 3 days after that editor said she wanted it, the publishing house shut down. Yeah, Midnight Ink.
Yeah, I know which one.
Yeah, so like publishing is heartbreaking, but you have to keep going. And I don't know if I would have kept going if I didn't have my community around me saying like, no, I've read your work. I know you're good. I know you've got this. You just have to keep going. And so I eventually wrote the book that would become Arsenic and Adobo. And that book sold, I had parted ways with my agent. She did not like Arsenic and Adobo. So I had to find a new agent to represent me. She sold that book at auction, which means multiple publishing houses wanted it, in 2 weeks, after years and years of being told nobody would want my books. So like, it's
Also, old white ladies like books about not old white ladies.
I
mean,
tell that editor. Yeah.
All right, Michelle, you are, do you have an agent?
No, I don't.
Okay, tell us how your publishing career started then. Tell us your journey.
I wrote the book that never got published. I queried it for about a year, and I realized that either something was wrong with my querying process or something was wrong with the product. So I realized that I didn't know what I was doing. So I went to the Writer's Digest conference in New York, and I was the newest newbie that ever lived. And my eyes were really opened, and there was a lot of sourness I noticed at the conference about traditional publishing, and it was very doom and gloom, and which was sad because I was just entering. And the first workshop that I walked into was the third path to publishing. Never heard of this before. It was all about hybrid presses, and I just was looking around at my fellows participants. I'm like, this sounds great. This is amazing. So the next workshop I went into was the exact, also kind of talked about hybrid publishing. I won't go into the whole thing. And so I went home and I started researching. She Writes Press was one of the ones I investigated. They are an all-women's press in Berkeley. They do vet. And they do have traditional distribution, which sounded great to me. So I submitted this big novel that I had written, and at first they said yes because they read the first 20 pages, and then they said, oh, but no.
How long was it?
It was 240,000 words.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's 2 books,
Do you see
Michelle.
what I mean? I didn't know what I was doing with the product.
It's almost 3 books.
Yeah. So they said, no, there's no way we're publishing this. So I said, well, you know what, I'm writing this mystery novel at the same time. And they're like, okay, let us see it. And so they read it and they said, yeah, we'll take this. So it's been a great relationship. We live sort of between self-publishing and traditional publishing. So, you know, I could talk more about that, but that's the short answer.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for tonight, but we want to thank Tracy Clark, Michelle Cox, Mia P. Manansala, and Lori Rader-Day for being here, as well as our dear friends at the Society of Midland Authors. We encourage you to check out their website if you'd like to get involved with them and learn more about being part of the writing community in Chicago. And of course, we thank all of you for being here and for watching virtually. Books are for sale in the lobby, and we're going to start the book signing here in just a moment. Don't forget to check out the Chicago Public Library's 150th anniversary landing page on our website, chipублib.org/150. Thanks, everyone.